Former President Jacob Zuma is expected to file answering affidavits at the Zondo Commission's application for contempt of court, coupled with a punitive 2-year prison term. The Constitutional Court is set to hear that application on the 25th of March. The court issued a directive giving Zuma and the second and third respondents, that's the Minister and the National Commissioner of Police. He has been given until Monday, the 8th of March. That's tomorrow to file those answering affidavits. In fact, the Zondo Commission will then have until March the 12th to file replying affidavits and until the 15th of March to file written submissions. Plenty taking place. In fact, the respondents have been given until the 19th of March to respond with written submissions of their own. To help us place these developments, let's bring in political analyst and author of the book, 2 minutes, I think, to midnight, beg your pardon. That's Dr. Oscar van der Heerden. Doc, thanks very much for your time, and it's great to have you on the program. If I may start with just an aside, by reflecting on a story that I saw in the Sunday Times this morning. We heard of a witness, identified as witness 1, apparently surviving an attempt on his life. This is an individual who gave Transnet-related testimony at the Zondo Commission in recent weeks. I wonder if we should be concerned about the chilling effect this could have on other witnesses that might appear before the Zondo Commission.
Yes, thanks for that, Tayanda. I do think it is a very serious concern, a very genuine concern that witnesses are now being targeted by criminal elements, of course. I think it's most unfortunate, and I do hope that the South African Police Service and our intelligence services will take this threat very serious because, as you know, the Zondo Commission in itself is a very unique undertaking by any country to try and bring to the fore state capture and corruption. And if we are now going to have a situation where witnesses' lives are in danger, it might actually curtail the actual task of getting to the truth.
Let's speak then about the Jacob Zuma matter, which is unfolding, of course, in the backdrop. We're also seeing reports that the ANC top 6 is set to meet with the former president now as soon as tomorrow. This apparently will take place at the Tuli House and not necessarily at the Nkandla homestead. Do you take this as just a box-ticking exercise or reckon something substantial will come out of this meeting?
You know, to be honest, I do think that the intent is probably there for it to be substantial, to try and make a breakthrough. And that breakthrough would be to convince former President Zuma to appear at the Zondo Commission and to put an end to this legal constitutional crisis that he has created. However, I'm not sure whether that is going to ultimately be the outcome of the meeting because we've seen former President Zuma's intransigence with regards to complying with the legal system.
Right. I mean, everything is still speculative at this point. But, I mean, if the former president does refuse to appear before the commission, can you imagine any kind of compromise being reached?
Well, no, I cannot, to be honest. I think that, you know, there's so many people that are going to Nkandla to go and have tea for their own personal agendas and reasons. But the most meaningful visitor, of course, was Minister of Police, Becky Cele. And I think Cele went there as a messenger to say that, you know, we really want you to comply. We really want you to do what is required by the courts. Otherwise, I will have to do my job without fear or favor or prejudice. And no amount of wannabe so-called MKVA types here at Nkandla is going to stop that process.
And I wonder,
so Zuma out of options, I under, and he's trying to find a compromise as to how he can get himself out of the situation, because I think it is quite apparent that no one is taking this for granted, and everyone is quite serious, including the 2-year prison sentence.
I wonder if that visit by Becky Cele that you referenced was a constructive or destructive one insofar as optics are concerned. Because if what you're saying is true, then it raises questions about why it appears the former president is being treated differently from anybody else. Nobody else has the minister visiting them to warn them about possible arrests for violating the law, which I imagine the former president is well aware of. And because of that, it certainly does cast aspersions to the concept that the former president is not being treated differently here.
Yeah, but it shouldn't really, to be honest. In my opinion, the problem is that I think a lot of people, including myself, have our very strong reservations for the person of Jacob Zuma, having been at the helm and leading the country into a process of corruption and dissent and decay over the last 10 years. We might not like him, but he is the former president of the Republic. And so some people might want to argue that he is just another law-abiding citizen or a citizen who's got rights and so forth, but he's the former president. And unfortunately, I have to make the point. We might not like him, but he's as the former president of the Republic. I think that is why the Minister of Police afforded him that courtesy to go and say, this kind of behavior from a former president is really unbecoming, and what can we do to try and avoid a nasty affair? Why does the minister not go to ordinary citizens? Because they were not the former president of the Republic. I know it leaves a bitter taste, but I do think that we must afford the former president that courtesy at least.
I can almost hear the strong objections from different quarters of our society pushing back against
I'm
that.
sure.
But very well, that's your perception. Perhaps you're feeling rather generous this Sunday morning. But outside the politics taking place, there's the legal proceedings that are also underway. I mean, you might have heard me throwing around a few dates to be considered as we count down to the 25th of March. That's when this contempt of court case is set to be heard. Most significantly for where we are now in the timeline is that tomorrow is when former President Jacob Zuma is set to submit his filing affidavits for this court case. It comes in a context where the commission itself is in a race against time. That considered, do you feel that Zondo perhaps has already lost this?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that Deputy Chief Justice Zondo is very clear in his mind, regardless of the time frame. He wants to make a point, and it's a very important point to anyone and everyone, including former presidents, which is that you are not going to undermine the integrity of the commission. You are not going to get away with being in contempt of court and not to actually obey summons. And if you do these things, then you must be held to account. And I think that the Deputy Chief Justice is absolutely clear on this. So even though the request for the extension of the commission is to actually finalize the report, he is very clear in his mind that he will not conclude matters unless he sees this through. Not because it's personal, as Zuma is wanting to claim. I think that the Deputy Chief Justice would have reacted to anyone actually undermining the commission in the manner and form of which the former president has, simply getting up and leaving in the middle of proceedings and then not wanting to comply to come back. So I think that this is something that the commission, under the leadership of the Deputy Chief Justice, simply has to see through to its logical conclusion.
I mean, but do you honestly think that could happen before the commission is forced to wrap up its work? I mean, some legal experts we spoke to say that the legal proceedings involving the former president could take as much up to 6 months, time the commission simply doesn't have, raising questions about, I guess, call it the legitimacy of the findings of the commission in the absence of the voice of the former president.
Well, I mean, my argument or my point would be that regardless of whether the commission wraps up its work in June, court proceedings will continue. The violation has already taken place. It's not as if it's not there. And the former President Zuma will have to face the music. So going to prison is not contingent on whether the commission continues or not. The commission can wrap up its work and submit its report without the testimony of the former president, but because of that, he will be held accountable and will have to face prison time.
If we're able to look even further into the future, Dr. Oscar, I mean, in a context where the Commission does release the report, history has taught us that the many people who are likely to be implicated will follow through with many objections, interdicts, requests for reviews, etc., etc. And that could take years before we actually get to see someone behind bars. If we believe that cynical view to be the likely outcome, does the Commission's value extend past anything beyond just being a great way to document this moment in history so that future generations can see what happened?
Look, I mean, as you say, it is speculative. We're looking into the future. I do think that the changing of the terms of reference a year or so ago by the President of the Republic, Ramaphosa, suggested that gave the NPA the necessary powers, the SIU and the Hawks and so forth, to actually proceed with criminal proceedings and prosecutorial proceedings where they see that the evidence is clearly stark in terms of wrongdoing. So I think that it's going to be a bit of both. I think that it is going to be a recording of what we should never allow again in the history of our country, and other countries will learn from it as well, especially on the continent. But I do think that we are going to see prosecutions and people going to jail. Already, as you know, we have one or two cases that have flown from the Zondo Commission, where people are having to be appearing in court. So I don't want to be too pessimistic and say that we are not going to see people in orange overalls. However, I agree with you, Ayanda, it could take time.
Absolutely. Dr. Oscar van der Heerden, always great getting your insights. Dr. van der Heerden is a political analyst as well as author of 2 Minutes to Midnight, Will Ramaphosa's ANC Survive. Doc, thanks very much for your insights.